Nice.
All right, hey guys, what's up? Welcome to ETSK Tutorials, and this is the interview with Dr. William Klein, and I believe you also go by the name of Bill.
Yeah, it's Bill.
All right, so thanks for being on the show, and welcome. So,
Thank you.
yes, so for anybody who doesn't know who Bill is, or William Klein, he is the CEO and founder of Rival Theory, and that is the company that is responsible for Rain Indie, which is a really powerful, really cool free AI pathfinding and behavior tool for Unity 3D. So did I get that right? Is there any information I'm missing?
Oh, I think you got it right.
All right, great. Well, I guess why don't we just jump into the questions. So my first question I got for you is how and when did rival theory begin, and what is rival theory doing today?
Yeah, so Rival Theory started in 2010, kind of late summer 2010, and we really started as an artificial intelligence company doing not just artificial intelligence for games, but artificial intelligence kind of in the big picture, machines taking over the world type of sense.
Oh, really?
So yeah, yeah. So I mean that's really what we've always been about, not just about the way traditional game developers think about AI, but really more about the way science fiction people think about AI. So yeah, we've been around and we've been building the software that we've got for about 2.5 years or something like that. And what we're doing today is really concentrating more on the intelligent machine part of AI and a little bit less on the game tool aspects of AI as far as the overall company.
Okay, so you're trying to create something because I mean I've only used it for a video game so far. So from what I can tell, it's um, the only product that I've used of yours so far is great for video games. So you're thinking that you are trying to create it flexible enough that you can use it in other areas besides video games?
Yeah, it's not just about flexibility. It's about Rain India is a great tool for putting in sort of behavior for characters inside of a game. But what happens if you want to take those characters outside of a game? Or what happens if you want those characters to be super intelligent and make their own decisions and things like that? That's the type of tech that we're adding today.
Okay. And is that Sentio basically?
Yeah, a lot of when you see the word Sentio coming from us, we're talking about that really high end AI.
Oh, okay, so that's basically the next big thing for rival theory.
Yes.
All right, great. Well, I actually have more questions for that later on, so we'll come back to that. But my next question is: it says on your bio that you worked on AI for 20 years and the game industry for 10 years. So what kind of? I guess we've already started talking about this a little bit, but what kind of AI have you been working on besides just video games?
Yeah. So when I when I got my PhD in AI back in late '90s, I'm dating myself. Um, I was actually working on building. This is going to sound really geeky. We're working on building artificial intelligence for controlling particle accelerators. And actually, my PhD thesis was building control systems that use AI for linear accelerators at Brookhaven and Argonne National Labs. So that's how I got my start in AI.
Okay,
Um,
that sounds a little bit more like robotics to me.
yeah, this wasn't really robotics. It was more um, about managing complex systems, let's say.
Okay, that makes sense. Um, So let's see. The next question I have is where did the inspiration for Rain Indie's mechanics come from? Was it evolved from previous projects or designed from already existing concepts from other AI systems in the gaming industry?
It's interesting because even though my background is in kind of the research and educational type of AI, the stuff that you learn at a university, my background in games really started in mobile games with a company I had called Extreme AI. It's funny, my first company was called Extreme AI, but it was not an AI company. It was a video game company.
Huh.
And the first device it was mobile, and the first device we were working on was called the Tapwave Zodiac, and a few people might recognize that as an old kind of game console based on the Palm OS platform. So that was back in like 2003. Um, anyway, I don't need to talk too much about that, but my background was kind of more in traditional games from the game industry side, and so our first cut at doing AI for games was much more like traditional AI for games. So it was really about pathfinding, and it was about sort of feeding information into a system that you could then make decisions on, and not very much about the principles of artificial intelligence and that sort of thing. In fact, a lot of what we got came out of Ian Millington's book, because that's the one we were using to teach with at the university. I did a little bit of teaching as well for game AI. So the background of Rain Indie really started off its genesis as being kind of, how can we take the things that other people are doing for game AI and making them work on top of Unity? We also spent some time, though, talking to guys like Alex Champinard from AI Game Dev, and the work they were doing over there, promoting behavior trees and things like that. And in fact, we made some last-minute decisions before we released what was Rain 1 to add some things that those guys were doing. So the early genesis of it was Rain 1, and the early genesis was the types of things that kind of the community has been doing traditionally for AI.
Okay, sweet. All right, well, I guess my next question is A star is a term that you hear a lot when talking about any kind of AI, like especially when talking about building AI. So how would you explain in your own terms what A star really is? Like, I know that we were talking earlier, well, not in this particular live stream, but in the previous live stream about an hour ago, we were talking about A star, the product. There's a asset on the asset store called A star, I believe.
Right.
Um, so, but really what I mean is A star in the sense of like A star theory. Like, what is that?
Yeah, it's a good question, actually, because for people, the school that I went to, which was the University of New Mexico, they taught AI to be really about symbolic AI, which means dealing with search and with pattern matching and with things like that. And really kind of the basis for all of the AI that you do there is really search. How do you take data and search for answers inside of it? A star is really nothing more than a search algorithm, and it has nothing to do at all, by the way, with pathfinding. It only has to do with being able to find the best answer using heuristics. So whether you see A star pathfinding like Aaron Granberg's stuff or anybody else's, they're really just using the same principle, which is a really, really simple search algorithm. They just happen to be using a search over pathfinding information when they do it. And the only reason that's called A star is because the first guys that did pathfinding for games used that particular version of a search algorithm for finding information about where to move in the world. So A star actually is not a game term at all. It's an AI research term and a computer science term.
Hmm.
And it really just means nothing more than heuristic search.
Huh. I never knew that.
We
So,
don't, by the way, we don't actually use A star directly inside of Rain, instead of Rain Indie. We use something called LPA star, and the algorithm is accessible at the API level. Anybody that's a coder that wants to get in and mess with it. LPA star is lifelong planning A star, and what it really means is we build a network in a way that not only can you come up with a really fast initial search on your path, you can also modify the graph and then modify your search real time. So anyway, there's some research papers out there. I think our documentation even provides a link to those if anybody ever wants to look it up.
okay. All right, explain that to me one more time. So it searches through and um all right, you called it LPA star and it sorry, I got to hear that one more time because I kind of got lost.
Okay, so again, A star itself is really just search. LPA star is a special way of conducting that search where you put information into the search graph that lets you really quickly sort of modify information about the graph. For instance, you can mark areas of your mesh unwalkable, and then you can do a really, really fast update to your previous path and correct it. That's something that regular A star doesn't do.
So it's a dynamic basically, a little bit more dynamic than A star is.
Right. Yeah,
And it sounds like A star it's a whole lot of like there's only one answer. So I guess with this there would be like besides just like no, that will not get you to where you need to go. It'll give you more information like you can't walk on that. That's lava.
yeah. Well, and part of it's that with regular A star, if for the most part, if something changes uh, like a car gets wrecked right in the middle of your path and you need to change where you're walking, you have to pathfind again from the start to the end. You have to start over completely. with something like LPA star, you can just tell the graph that there's a car in the way right there, and it'll just find a path around it rather than repathing from the start. That's what
Oh,
it's really.
okay. I see. So like it'll basically say like like all of a sudden now there's a car in my way and I know that I'm here and the point that I was trying to get to is here, so let me just find a path just to find my way around the car as opposed to recalculating the entire path.
Yes.
Okay, now I get it. All right, I'm trying to think of the system that I had in AI was even A star because I think what it was really more of a numbers game and just finding the lowest number, like just going from I had like cells and doors and it would count the number of doors to get between the cells and like every time it like I guess it kind of would just like expand one section and check all the cells and then if it didn't find what it was looking for to expand again, it would just keep counting up until it found the numbers it was looking for. So I guess that sounds more like the what was the first thing you said? Start with an H?
Oh, I was talking about heuristic search. Is that what you meant?
Heuristics. Yeah. So that sounds more like heuristics. What I'm doing there. I don't know, but
Well, I think, like we were saying, I think most of this just boils down to finding some way to search through your data and get the right answer. A star is just one way. Anything that uses heuristics, uses information to get you a better answer faster. That's just more ways of doing the same thing, and they're all probably equally valid. So.
okay. Yeah, like I know with my system, I have no idea how you would calculate like what you were saying with the LPA star where calculating only part of a path as opposed to redoing the entire thing. Like I have no idea how you would code that. I was just barely able to code it to go from the beginning to the very end and recalculate it almost every frame.
Yeah, I mean, doing that part of AI, especially for games, a lot of people when they use the term AI for games, they're really just talking about pathfinding and finding information about the path graph. And so that's why so much of game AI concentrates on this algorithm, this A star. In the end, if people actually look it up and get into the technical details, it's actually not that complicated and not that hard to code. So.
Hmm. Yeah, it's just a matter of doing it the right way and trying to find a way that isn't glitchy.
Right.
All right. So my next question is why is recasting called recasting? So for those of you who haven't used Rain Indie yet, there's a navigation grid tool that I guess that you can use that basically is kind of like it's different from the waypoints, but it's a way where it's basically like a one button click. It scans the whole place and it creates a graph that sits over your entire level. And I believe that in your system is called recasting.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And I'm just wondering why is it called recasting?
So back in 2009, a really brilliant guy by the name of Mikko Mononen came up with this algorithm called recast. So it's not an invention of ours. It's actually something that's fairly well known in the AI community. And Mikko was nice enough to make it all public domain. So he released his code in C++ and put it on Google or something like that. So we can't lay claim to that. That's actually his algorithm. We've
Hmm.
done a lot of work to tweak it and modify it and make it work really well for what we want and how we use it. But the base algorithm is his. And I actually looked up. I saw that this question was going to come up, and I tried to look up and find out why Mikko called it recast. And I don't actually have a good answer for that. I couldn't figure it out. So I'll have to
Okay.
ask.
Huh. So that's a question for him and not you then.
Yeah, yeah.
That's pretty interesting. All right.
But if you, I wouldn't be in the same way that A star is kind of a common term around AI. These days, recast is as well. So if you see the word recast from somebody else's product or something somebody else is doing, they're probably talking about the same algorithm that we use.
Okay, that's pretty cool. What was translating that algorithm from C++ into Unity like? I,
It was a nightmare.
oh
That
yeah.
that algorithm is very, very complicated, and there's a lot of kind of hidden information in the code that Miko put out. And because of it, you have to spend a lot of time, especially if you're going to change it in any way. You have to spend a lot of time really understanding it and understanding how it works and why it works. So we've invested a lot of time and energy in that, understanding it, making sure that we understand it, so that we can modify it and make it do other things. So it was
Mm.
pretty tough. The algorithm, just in case anybody's interested, the algorithm works by essentially pixelating or voxelating your entire map. So it turns it into a set of little tiny cubes, essentially. And it almost looks like Lego bricks when it's done.
Mm-hmm.
And then the system essentially uses something like filling up that entire area with water to figure out where the heights of things are. Then it uses a way to generate a set of triangles that span across all those pieces, and then chops them up into little pieces that eventually become your navigation mesh or your navigation grid in RainIndy's case. And you can see what that looks like. There's a really cool visualization inside of RainIndy to see what that looks like.
Yeah, actually, why don't I pull that up while we're talking? But in case anybody was wondering what's going on in the background, I'm actually not touching the computer, even though it looks like I am. That's just pre-recorded footage that I recorded last night, so you guys can look at myself working with RainIndy. Actually, what I'm doing in the video in the background, that's actually in total, it's a half an hour long video. So by the end of this interview, you should be able to see me shooting apart that robot zombie using the RainIndy system. So, anyways, so why don't I ask the next question while I'm trying to multitask here? But had you worked with Unity before RainIndy, and how is working with Unity different / similar to AI that you've worked on in the past?
So actually, the answer is no. When we first started doing what was Rain 1, we built it on top of XNA, not on top of Unity, for about the first 3 or 4 months that we were working on it. But when it came time to start looking at it more as a product rather than a project, we looked around and saw that Unity was a better platform that indies were building their software on. And so we took our code and moved it over from XNA to Unity. So Unity's been fantastic. Unity is a great way for people to build games.
Mm-hmm.
There's been some challenges to work within Unity for a plugin like Rain, but they've been acceptable, and we found ways to do everything we want to do. But the nicest thing about Unity and Rain is that you don't really have to, with XNA, you still got to be a coder. You have to write code to be able to use it. With Unity, you don't. And we tried to follow that model with RainIndy to make it to where if you don't like code, you don't have to see it, don't have to touch it. You can still use RainIndy.
Yeah, definitely. I've definitely noticed that. And actually in the example that I use in here where you can shoot this robot zombie guy apart, I did get into code, but I had the code go alongside of RainIndy. So the two of them never actually communicated with each other. So it was pretty much, actually I don't even think I have the actual AI delete itself. I think the AI is still there and following you, but it's just invisible. So it doesn't like do anything. Um, so yeah, it was pretty easy, like just having code work side by side with it. So like I mean, I used code for it, but I didn't at the same time, I guess. So I can definitely see what you're saying. Like you can create the full AI without any code. Um,
It kind of went to how we went about developing RainIndy because when we were developing it, we had a sample scene. I think we were using Unity's old Penelope example code.
oh,
That
I
was used,
remember that.
that was used to teach you how to do mobile, I think. But we were trying to get we were trying to reprogram Penelope to play the game herself without a person involved. And we were trying to use Rain to do it. And our measuring stick for how well we were doing with Rain was how many lines of code we needed outside of Rain. And we got all the way down to where we needed like one line of code to hook a couple things together, and that was it. And that's when we felt like we were actually getting somewhere, is when we eliminated all the code.
Wow, nice. All right, so I have it pulled up on my screen, and I think if I just click refresh recast, I think we'll get the visualization of the recast that we were talking about a second ago. There it goes. So as you guys can see, I don't know if Bill, if you can see this on your screen, but on the live stream, this is what the recast navigation grid looks like. So just bear in mind, I just hit the button and go. I didn't adjust any settings, so it is colliding with a few things that I didn't want it to, but that's without adjusting any settings. So that's what that looks like.
Yeah, it's kind of a cool visualization because if you notice, all those boxes have arrows on them,
Mm-hmm.
and the arrows essentially are telling you what pieces are connected to what other pieces. You can pretty quickly tell what areas are walkable, which things can be walked to from which other things, and it helps you find places that are problems in there. So if you need to adjust the recast or adjust your level a little bit, you can find it pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's definitely great for that. What do the red arrows mean?
So when the graph is created, it's divided up into regions based on how recast works, and the red arrows define different regions that are connected to each other. So you'll almost always find red arrows pointing towards other red arrows, and those are
Yeah.
pointing to regions that you can reach from other regions. It's mainly a debugging tool to tell you. Actually, it's mainly a debugging tool for us. So we
Oh,
can
okay.
and make sure we don't have problems inside of the algorithm. But there are some places where you can, in order to optimize the grid that's coming out, you can tell it to eliminate small regions from your map. And part of how you can tell where regions are is by looking for those red arrows. So
Okay, nice. Yeah, that's pretty cool. All right, let's see. Let me just pull up my window and find out what my next question was. Okay. Uh, what's the easiest part of designing and developing AI, and what's the hardest part?
let me start with the hardest part because usually the hardest part is figuring out what you want the AI to do. And I don't mean at a high level, saying that I want this AI just to go attack somebody. That's pretty easy. The hard part is deciding exactly how you want them to attack and what you want their behaviors to be. Because, similar to other types of programming, defining behavior is really about being specific, saying, whenever one thing happens, I want the AI to respond in another way. We've tried to make it so that once you make that decision happen, it's pretty easy to translate that into behavior. That's what the behavior tree editor is all about, is saying, I've got a good spec for how I want the AI to behave. I should be able to really easily translate that into behavior. And so you can do that, but trying to figure it out in the first place, I think, is the more difficult part.
Yeah, it sounds like that would be quite challenging creating like I don't even know how you would do that on paper or just how you would like figure like where you would even start really just figuring out because I mean you're creating a tool that is going to be used by many different people and it's just like figuring out how can you create a tool to suit the needs of I mean something that's as unique as video game development like no two games are the same so yeah it's just like the I don't know where I was going with that but
Well, it's kind of a funny thing because a guy from MIT Media Lab named Jeff Orkin, who's famous for doing the Fear AI,
mm,
for video game Fear, he wrote a paper in which he was talking about AI as just being two things. It's being animation, and it's being movement, right? Those are in his view, those are the only two things that are possible with AI.
mm,
If you take that approach, then really what you're trying to do is make your AI move around the world and then act like it's doing something. And then the final part to that would be hooking that animation part or whatever it's doing into some sort of game code. So when you look at it from that perspective, it's actually not that difficult, right? And in fact, it's not that difficult to create a tool to do that. I need to move, I need to animate. Um, so from a tools perspective, it's not that bad.
hmm.
Now, I should also say that that's not our view.
Yeah.
AI is a heck of a lot more than movement and animation, but from some perspective, you can look at that's the job of a tool to integrate with the game system.
Yeah, and because I mean that's what the player is gonna see is it animating and moving, and then I guess also like creating bullets and a few things here and there like that. But yeah, and I mean it just seems like it'd just be so complicated because not only were you like okay we want this AI to do certain behaviors, but you've created a system in which you can create behaviors. It seems like if you want the AI to like go for an alarm when it sees the player. That's something that the designer of the game can create themselves using Rain Indie. So it just seems like that would just be so much more complicated to think about than just like, oh, I want this AI to go press this alarm. Like if you're building your own game, as opposed to I want to create a tool so that if the designer wants to create whatever they want to create and like just the way that it emulates the way that like a brain works essentially. It's like a simplified version of a brain. Um, but yeah, I guess that was more of a statement than a question.
No, but we kind of took that approach. We said, what things can we actually help people with on the AI side in a tool? And that's really what the parts of Rain Indie represent. It's our sensor pieces that say, how do we take data from the world that the AI has to know about in order to make decisions and bring that in? It's the pieces that the behavior tree helps you with. How do you define behavior, and how do you translate that into something that the AI actually does, the actions it takes? That's how we came up with the primitives. So inside of our behavior tree, we have things called primitive actions, and those are really the things we can automatically do for your AI. And that's things like moving, playing audio, making animations happen, that sort of thing. And then the last bit is really how do we interact with somebody's game? And so we let people tag the world with aspects that the sensors can pick up, and we make it really easy for you to integrate custom code with the behavior tree stuff. So you pretty much have total control over how AI sort of fits into a game. Pretty simply, though.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely would have to agree. All right. My next question is testing is an important part of anything in video game development. So what is testing like for such a versatile tool? Is it different for testing a game, testing for game developers rather than just players?
So are you asking about our ability to test the product, or are you asking about people's ability to do testing as they use the product?
I guess I'm talking about QA testing and kind of like because I'm a little bit more familiar with QA testing in the sense of just a regular video game where I can just say hand off my game to a college student and just say, "Hey, play this and let me just watch you and I'll find out what my game is doing wrong." And that person doesn't have to know anything. Whereas with your selling, or I guess not selling, just giving away a free tool, so it's a complex and powerful tool that you can do a lot of different things with, and it's a pretty complex system, and it's not just meant for anybody to use. It's meant for people who want to make video games. So, what is doing quality assurance testing like for this product?
It's kind of interesting that we had to make a lot of design decisions as we were putting the product together, that were really about how do we help people stay out of trouble when they're trying to build their game and they're trying to do QA, trying to understand what it does. For example, trying to decide if the right behavior for a movement failing is to actually throw an error that the developer could catch and see that there's an actual problem, or to come up with a really decent default behavior so that things act reasonably even when you have errors.
Hmm.
Um, and that's been a tough thing all along. In fact, if people want to give us feedback on how we're doing there, that's the type of feedback we welcome for sure. But we use the product ourselves all the time. That helps us both on the QA side of making sure the product is working and that we can fix it, but also on understanding what it's like to use the product to come up with the result that you're looking for. How can you do QA on the AI that you've built? We put in some controls and some feedback. Excuse me. Some feedback for you there on the places we felt like we could, and we've made it as easy as possible by putting things like debugging statements inside of the behavior tree and things like that.
Okay. So when you said that your team uses Rain Indie, like what kind of things do you do with it? Like just making like the example projects, or you just do random tests, or?
We also help people build AI for their games all the time.
Oh, really?
So we we are consistent users of the product ourselves.
Oh, okay. So is that with actual video game development companies, or are you just working with like indies or hobbyists?
Um, all sorts of things. Big companies, small companies. We're constantly helping people who send us questions on support. Oftentimes, the way we answer support questions is by asking people to send us a simplified version of their project, and we actually dig in and help them solve the problem directly, and then send them back, a solution using Rain Indie. So we've touched or built AI for hundreds of projects.
Wow. That is a really cool idea. So you're really killing two birds with one stone there. You're getting great customer support, like exceptional customer support that I for a free product, and then you are also getting really really valuable feedback in how people are using your product.
Yeah, and it's part of the way we try to build the product in the first place is by using it. So we don't when we build AI, we use the product. We don't take shortcuts. We don't just dig in and reuse the source code or something like that. We're stuck with the same restrictions and the same product that everybody else that everybody else uses, and so that helps us to try to make it the best it can be.
Wow, that's very cool. So do any other? I've never heard of a company doing that. Just for like that's such a great testing technique for a tool like that. Like,
It makes it really important that we put out a good product because otherwise we do way too much support.
oh yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
we're
You
just
gotta manage your time. All right. Um, this next question might be fun. What is the coolest AI that you've ever seen?
um, that's a strange question because it depends on whether you're talking about AI for games or if you're talking about AI in general. For AI for games, I'm really fond of the AI that the Halo series does and the guys over at both at Bungie and 343 have done there. They've used a lot of techniques that are similar to things that we put in Rain Indie. In fact, in a lot of ways, you could build Halo type AI using that product. Halo is mainly based on using behavior trees to build their AI. And those guys have done such a great job. There's plenty of papers out there written by some of the guys that did it that are available in the GDC archives and other places online that really talk about what their design philosophy was and how they build really great experiences with the AI. So those guys are pretty inspiring and they've done great stuff.
Hmm. Yeah, cause yeah, I know. I think I've played every Halo game. They definitely have good AI, but I bet you probably have like a real like trained eye when it comes to AI. Because I know like I will probably notice some things that the average player won't notice when it comes to AI. But I bet you probably see a lot of things when it comes to AI. Just like,
I suspect that a lot of the audience, I suspect a lot of people that are game developers are kind of used to that. That the more you do game development, the more you can sort of see that when you play a game. You look at a game and say, "Oh, I see what they did there."
mm-hmm.
Like there's a problem with their pathfinding in this one spot. I can see that their animation was a little bit jumpy right here. You sort of notice that stuff when you are a game developer, and the same is true for AI people. So
Yeah, bet you that's really interesting. How about for non-game AI?
that's a funny one too, because what I'll say is I like a lot of the projects that are going on out in the world, like things like Watson, things like Siri. But at the
Hmm.
end of the day, I don't really consider those things very AI-like. Those are very search engine-like or something like that. I'd say the best AI I've ever seen is what I see in science fiction movies, and that's what we kind of aspire to here, is the things that I see in science fiction movies.
Oh yeah.
So, so I'll go for things I see in The Matrix or things that I see in Terminator or something like that.
Yeah. Have you ever seen like I know can you personally tell the difference between like let's take for example like a vocabulary or a like say like a talking AI that you can talk to. Like I know I've seen many of them that just use speech recognition and then it's just like a response tree where like if you say this they'll say this and like some of them can get really complex but it's still just like a tree of predefined things that it can say. Um have you ever seen like an AI that really gets into like where you can almost say that that AI is alive?
No, I can say I haven't ever seen it. The things that I've seen that come the closest to that are usually not very AI-like under the hood at all. A lot of times, those people use very special tricks to sort of trick people into thinking that what they do is very intelligent, but they aren't very. The things that actually go for sort of hardcore AI from a coding standpoint, um, they typically don't look quite as good because because they're trying to do a really, really hard job, solve a really, really hard problem. I'll also say that communication, being able to talk to people, is one of the hardest things you can do with AI, and so it's not surprising that it's hard to find good stuff out there.
Yeah, definitely, and especially when at the time being the fake AI, like you said, tricks more people than the real AI really does.
Yeah, it's true. So
Um, what was I gonna ask? Um, well, I don't remember now, but let's go to. All right. So I know it hasn't been released yet, and this may all be top secret, but what can you tell the community about Sentio?
I think what I can say is that what we're doing with Sentio is trying to solve the problems that we don't normally try to solve with game AI. All of the hard stuff that we talk about in the sort of research and development AI community, trying to make machines think like people do, trying to make them more human-like, and really, and as far as Sentio goes, trying to make that applicable to game development is what we're really doing with it. Um, so when we finally get around to releasing Sentio, and I'm not sure exactly when that's going to be just yet, but when we do, it's going to be really a very different take on how you build characters for games and what they're capable of.
Hmm. Do you think this will replace Rain Indie?
Um, I don't think so because Rain Indie is built to do a specific thing, which is to make it easy for people to add behavior to characters in the types of games that most of the indie community is building. Somebody that's building a game that's really about a first-person shooter or getting a guy to move around a scene correctly or something like that, they don't need to have something that can also cry when it cuts its finger or has strong emotions or any of that really hardcore stuff. And they probably don't want it either. It's too complicated. So I don't think that what we're doing with Sentio really changes Rain Indie at all.
Oh, okay. What kind of like products other than games do you think we'll see Sentio in, or can you tell us of any for sure companies that are already using Sentio?
I, for almost everything we do with Sentio, we have non-disclosure agreements, so I can't talk about specific companies. But what I
Okay.
can say is that we are working across entertainment industries. So we have customers in film. We have some Hollywood studios using Sentio. We have we have products that we're working on in physical toys. So not just video games and not just computers, but actual toys you would buy off the toy store shelf,
Hmm.
uh, and video games and things that span all three of those. So things that work in films and games and toys.
Dang, that sounds like a really exciting product.
We're excited.
Yeah, but that sounds like that sounds like a really, really big thing to be working on and making.
Sensio is a pretty big project. It's probably about 10 times the size as Rain,
Wow.
at
Um,
least, at least.
will Sentio be only for Unity?
No, like I said, it's going to be going into physical products and things like that. We built Sensio on purpose. Not that there's anything wrong with Unity, but we wanted to make sure we could operate outside of Unity when that was appropriate. So, so Sensio uh, works in a lot of places.
Okay, so it works in Unity and outside of Unity.
Yes.
So that I don't even know how that'll work, but that sounds awesome. What will the I don't want to say user interface, but like how will working with this tool, like what will it be like? Will it be comparable to Rain Indie?
Um, the idea of Sensio is that you're really having a different sort of interaction with the characters that you're creating. So the interface will be more like designing a person and less like designing a game.
Hmm. So it'll be
If
like
that, how I can describe that, but it's not really about the game mechanics and the things that you do there. It's much more about how do you define true behavior? How would you create a person if you could?
okay. So is it going to go beyond behavior trees then?
Yes, for sure, absolutely.
Okay, so will you still have to like define stuff like this is the path its thought process will go to become sad.
No, as a developer, you don't operate at that level with Sentio.
So that just is taken care of for you.
Yes.
Wow. This sounds like a really interesting product that I'm really excited about. Let's see. Is there any questions about Sentio that we didn't already cover? No, it looks like we covered everything. All right, so my last question before we jump to see if there's any questions from the chat is what's the number one piece of advice that you can give an aspiring game developer who is looking to specialize in AI or otherwise?
I'd say typically um, the biggest piece of advice that I give anybody is to start simple. Solve simple problems before you solve hard problems, because usually the simple problems are harder than you think.
Yeah.
Um, and of course, we part of what we do here at Rival Theory is we're tool developers, and so oftentimes once we figured out how to solve a simple problem, we build a tool so we don't ever have to solve it again. So
Hmm.
if you're the type of person that likes to do that, I think that's a good approach. That's part of what's really nice about Unity as well, and the whole Unity experience is that it's built in a way that you can create tools for yourself or for other people. That's what the whole asset store is about. is to make development easier and to keep you from redoing things that other people normally have to do. So I'd say take advantage of all of that too, whether it's Rain-Indy or some other tool.
Yeah, that's a good piece of advice. All right, so I guess that is all the questions I have for you. So if we still have time, do you want to take some questions from the chat?
Sure, I'd be happy to.
I don't know if I know Nick. I don't know if you're listening, but did you say that you were taking down questions while we were talking?
He's nodding his head yes. So
Oh, okay. I know. Well, let's see. Well, here's one question that's just right here. But how about global? Wait, how about goal-oriented behaviors in rain?
okay, so that's a good question because for people that have seen our prior product, which was called Rain One, we had something called goal-oriented behavior, and goal-oriented behavior in Rain One was an example of something called utility-based AI. We felt like the version that we had in Rain 1 was a little bit too complicated and too hard to understand, especially for people that would be the type of people picking up Rain-Indy, people that might not necessarily be hardcore AI or hardcore programmer type people. So we actually ended up removing it when we made the Rain-Indy product. And it's our intention to put something like that back. In fact, we've talked to some of the other guys that are kind of in the AI community in enlisting their help to get the best possible utility-based AI into Rain-Indy. So we think it's coming back, but we want to make sure we get it right and make it easy to use and easy to understand. And only when we do that are we going to actually put it in there.
Okay. Just to clarify, what's the main difference between goal-oriented behaviors and behavior trees?
Well, goal-oriented behavior is really about trying to define some goal, some state that you want to be in. Whether that state is minimizing the health of your opponent, like by attacking them or something, or if you have like Sims style AI, making sure your Sim is eating and taking care of themselves or something like that. So goal-oriented behavior first defines a goal, then it defines a number of ways of accomplishing that goal. So you may have 4 or 5 different ways to do it. And then finally, it's about defining some function by which you can choose which way you want to do it. So goal-oriented behavior looks at all your possibilities and all the things that you want to accomplish and tries to come up with the best action or set of actions to accomplish that at any one time. It's actually a completely different way of doing AI than behavior trees. We found a way to integrate it into the behavior tree system inside of Rain 1. And when we bring it back in Rain-Indy, we'll still have it as part of the behavior tree system. So it'll be just a behavior style that you can drop into.
Hmm.
But it's actually a very different way of organizing how you choose actions.
Okay. I was gonna say it sounds almost as if it's like the direct opposite of a behavior tree, because the behavior tree seems to start like, this is where I am, these are things that are going to happen, and it's going to get to the goal because that's how the developer designed the game. Whereas it sounds like goal oriented is like the developer defines the goal and then everything else is figured out how to get to
Yeah,
that goal.
behavior trees tend to be task oriented. You know what task you want to be accomplishing, and now the behavior tree helps you do that in kind of a reactive way. Whereas goal-oriented behavior is outcome-based. You know what the goal was, but you don't know how you're going to accomplish it. So it's about choosing the right way to accomplish it.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds really exciting. If you can incorporate that kind of thing into the behavior tree, it sounds like that would create some really exciting AI to fight. If you can make them do different things based on like, yeah, it just sounds like the AI will think in a cooler way than, I don't know,
Yeah,
just like that dynamicness and
it
decision
does give you
making.
some different capabilities and some different ways of making the AI more dynamic. Um, like I said, with the version we had in Rain 1, we felt like it was a little too difficult to understand what the AI was going to do. Kind of back to your debugging question, it was a little difficult to figure out what your outcomes were going to be and really understand it yourself. So that's one of the problems we'll be trying to solve in the new version when we have it available.
Okay, real cool. All right, let's see some of the other questions. All right, we answered that question. What AI you've worked with outside of computers? We're talking about, I can't remember which lab you said, but working in like science labs, basically. Um,
I see a question that says, are there ways to automatically generate a nav mesh besides using recast and voxelizing the map? Um, I know other people have come up with ways of creating nav meshes based on level geometry directly. For example, some people actually define them manually by essentially drawing them out on top of the level geometry. And a lot of times people have tools for taking something that was automatically generated and then modifying it manually. So there are different ways to do it. Most people have gravitated towards recast because once you get your parameters right for recasting a scene, you can make any change you want to the scene and just very, very quickly come up with a new, very valid nav mesh without any extra work. So we found it's a pretty good way to do it.
Yeah. Oh, another cool thing about nav meshes that actually Nick mentioned to me in the chat. He is Jester, if you guys are wondering who that is. But we were talking about he used an example like you have like a nav mesh for like a mouse and then a nav mesh for a soldier, and then like the mouse will have a more detailed nav mesh for going like underneath tables and chairs, whereas the soldier will have a bigger blocks in their nav mesh, so it just like walks around that stuff, and you can have the two of them working side by side.
Right. Yeah,
Um,
we did that on purpose, trying to make sure that you could have multiple nav meshes in the scene for different characters, and that you assign them on a character by character basis. That being said, inside of Rain Indie, if two AI share the same nav mesh, it does not double up in memory. It does actually share them. So
wow, that's
there's some
pretty cool.
optimization.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of performance optimization stuff just going on behind the scenes there.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. I'm just reading this whole question. If I wait, no. How deep of a series of if statements or switch statements has been seen in AI? Is there a performance loss if you use too many if statements? That's a pretty interesting question.
Um, so usually when you see a bunch of if statements, what you really see is a state machine. It just happens to be coded up as a set of if statements.
Mm.
They're very, very fast, so I don't think it's possible for somebody uh, to create a bottleneck on performance just based on if statements. You can create bottlenecks based on loops or based on bad functions or something like that. No,
Yeah.
the problem is really much more about being able to design and maintain your code. If you have a deep set of if statements or something like that, your code's probably not that great, and you need to reorganize it a little bit. Otherwise, you're going to get in trouble sooner or later. And I say that from experience. I've done it.
Okay.
So
Yeah, because I know. Yeah, like what you said with doing for loops. I know with my AI code, I think I had a for loop inside of a for loop that was also organized. Or wait, no, it was a for loop inside of a for loop, and then that script was attached to like 50 different game objects in the scene, and then there was another game object that would for loop through all of those game objects. It was like a for loop inside of a for loop inside of a for loop basically, and it would like take the game like 10 minutes to load or something. Not 10 minutes, but it would take a really long time to load in the beginning. Um, so yeah, it's
yeah,
definitely.
I do think those type of things tend to be design issues. That if you can come up with a better design, usually you solve your performance problem too.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, I think really my issue with that was that I should have come up with a way to save that so that you don't need to load that at the beginning of the game, so that you could just like load it once, like the developer loads it once, so that the player doesn't need to wait for it to load every time. But it's something that I didn't quite get into yet.
hmm.
Um, wait. All right, how routines are built within Rain? What is the most performance consuming action?
um,
I guess he has two questions there.
so the most performance consuming action is probably um, doing a pathfinding step across a very large nav grid in which there is no solution. In other words, you try to walk someplace that you can't walk, and what will end up happening is that over time, the pathfinding system will do a complete search of the entire graph before it terminates. Now, we've got something in the system that lets that span out across frames, so it doesn't actually kill your frame rate, but it is performance intensive. The other piece is really has to do with path following and some of the ways that we try to do path smoothing inside of Rain Indie. And those are some places where you can probably expect some future optimizations from us.
Yeah, I mean, well, I guess I probably didn't try pushing it to the extreme yet, but from what I can tell, it seems pretty performance optimized for me. Um, oh, actually, I just thought of my own question. What are the differences between how Rain Indie works with a character controller and with a rigid body? Because I saw that it works pretty well with both, and from what I've used it so far, I think I prefer rigid body. But could you expand on that?
So there's different type of controllers, and what the controllers are really about is trying to match the outputs of our movement system to the ways in which you have your AI rigged up and the way you expect movement to happen. So the rigid body stuff essentially says that you expect physics to be controlling your movement, and so our system is trying to add physics type of information back to your object to try to get it to move around. So it expects there to be a rigid body and expects to add forces. The character controller version is expecting you to use an a Unity character controller, which we actually don't recommend because their character controller tends to have performance issues. But when it's there and you use the character controller, we see it, we link into it, and we try to make the movement happen through that. And if you use our kinematic controller, we sort of ignore everything else and just move your AI around ourselves. That's actually the fastest version, and it's
Hmm.
the version we use most often inside the office here.
Okay, I actually did not. To enable that, do you just check the is kinematic to true on the rigid body that's attached to your AI?
If you're using a rigid body, you can do that, yes. You probably want to do that, and you probably also want to open up your constraint system and turn off rotation, lock rotation in all three directions, and then you'll probably be in good shape. Um,
Turn it off?
yeah, but normally what we do is, depending on what you're doing, if we can get rid of the rigid body altogether, we'll do it. If we can't, then yeah, we'll definitely turn it into a kinematic.
Yeah, because I definitely noticed in Unity that it seems like there's no way. Well, I guess besides like ray casting and sphere casting, to do any sort of collision detection without a rigid body or a character controller.
Right.
You need at least one attached to one game object or the other. This is a good question that I actually asked Nick earlier, but it wasn't during this live stream. But why do you give Rain Indie away for free? That is a good question because it seems like this tool should cost money, yet it's free.
So there's a couple reasons for that. One is that as we were, prior to Rain Indie, we had Rain One, and Rain One was not a free product. And what we found was that we were spending a lot of time supporting that product, which was great. And a lot of the people that were using it had really really high expectations. But because it had a price tag on it, it limited the number of people that were using it, and it limited kind of the scope and our reach for doing things like support. So, in kind of a strange way, it costs us money to have it be a paid product because it changes how and why we do support, and it changes sort of the costs involved with that.
Hmm.
Scaling things up and having more users actually helps us out a lot as far as supporting the community and making sure people have what they want. But there's actually a bigger and better reason for why we gave it away for free. When I talk about the Sentio stuff, when I talk about really sort of awesome AI that does really cool stuff, that's what we as a company are very, very interested in. And we feel like the only way to get there is to make sure that the stuff that is kind of the basics of AI, the base stuff that everybody needs, that has to be there for everybody. Like that has to be the baseline. Everybody's got that. Everybody understands it before we can take the next step. So we felt like it was better to give that away and tell people you should expect to have that all the time. And the stuff that's really, really going to be important in the future is what we're doing with Sentio.
Hey, good answer. All right, let's see what other questions we can find. Um, Nick, what were some of the questions that you had written down?
I think I've got a couple here I can bring up.
Okay.
I see one asking about recast. It says once you generate the nav mesh, besides using, I'm sorry, once you generate the nav mesh, you still use the span data from recast. The answer is no, not in Rain Indie. We have some stuff in Sensio. We use some of the same tech, but we use it more extensively. So in Rain Indie, the answer is no. We don't continue using the span data. I see a question that says, how long until we have the Terminator? Um, That's a good question, and I'm interested if that people actually want the Terminator.
Yeah.
We actually have a goal of not destroying humanity inside the office, so it's good to have goals. But I think my real answer to that is we think we're going to be taking a step towards that with Sentio. We're not going to get all the way there with what we're working on right now, but you'll see things that are going to remind you of it, and you're going to see things that look like they're on the path towards that. We have some goals with the company overall to be able to get to that type of AI, except the killing humanity part, over the next few years. So I don't think it's decades away. I think it's a few years away.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like once Sentio's out, you'll pretty much be able to like, if you just create like a Furby with guns, you could pretty much take over the world.
God, I hope not.
Yeah. Well, I was about to ask you, but you said earlier that you can't answer any questions. But it really sounds like Furby isn't really the best example, but since that's a universally known thing, it sounds like that'll be some really cool things with Sentio, and like I'm really excited to see how Sentio reacts with inputs, like sensory input, like physical sensory inputs on like toys. Uh, well, is Sentio ready to bring in like what kind of input sensors can it use when it's like on a physical product like a toy?
You can use whatever sensors that toy has. There's no limitation there.
Oh, okay. So, well, does that mean like let's say you want to create like a little toy robot for a kid and put a camera on there and have that camera be able to recognize things? Would that be up to the developer to create how exactly that camera is going to recognize stuff and then send information to Sentio?
Yes and no. So the Sentio system has some capability to, excuse me, to support that already.
Sweet.
But there's always going to be work to do to integrate with somebody's specific hardware. So there's a little work on both sides there.
Okay, man. I'm really excited to see that product. Huh. How far away is self-aware AI? And what makes AI self-aware? Will Sentio be self-aware?
Oh, not sure how I can answer that question. Let me say that having self-aware AI is part of our plan. It is something we are working on. That is the theme behind what we're going for with Sentio. I'm not going to say we're going to get all the way there with what we're going to release with Sentio in our first version, but the idea is right.
Dang, man. The more we talk about Sentio, the more excited I get for that.
Well, I mean, I'm glad to hear that because much of what's been done, and I'm not knocking anybody in the AI community, but much of what's been done has really been concentrating on how to make things look real rather than how to make things actually real. With Sentio, we're working on the latter. How do you make things real?
Nice. I know you said that you don't have an exact uh, launch date yet, but is there like a ballpark? Like, what can we expect it in 2013, or will it be more like 14?
Um, I can't say. I can't
All
say
right.
because
All right.
my co-founder would kill me if I actually answered some of these questions. So
All
I better
right.
stop.
I totally
I can't.
understand. Just on the off chance that you were able to answer that question, thought I'd ask. Um, all right.
So I see there's an interesting question too here from somebody about Elder Scrolls AI, which says specifically, it's talking specifically about how they all have their own lives.
Hmm.
I think that's actually a really interesting aspect of what you could do with AI. What happens if the AI have lives outside of you, outside of your game experience? That is something that we're very interested in for Sentio. So what do I think of it? I think very highly of it. That's a great idea.
Dang. Yeah, because I assumed that in Elder Scrolls, it's probably totally faked and scripted, like kind of more like like once you come up to that AI is going to like check like, oh, if player completed this quest, I will use this conversation tree.
Well, but the idea of retaining history, of sort of on a character by character basis, remembering which interactions they've had with you and which they haven't, Even that step forward is a big one, I think. So I don't want to knock it. I'm not going to say it's just scripted or it's just silly. I think it's great. I think there's more that can be done, but I think that's along the right. That's the right way to go.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds cool. That sounds like it'd be. Well, I'm guessing that there would be a lot of things behind the scenes, like I mean, even though like the whole idea is to make it as real as possible, it sounds like technically it would still be fake, like having like the AI have their life outside of the player and what the when the player is playing the game. Like it sounds like you'll kind of have to like do like like a last minute calculation, like as the player actually goes to interact with the AI, it's gonna have to quickly calculate it. Like, all right, let's pretend what I was doing, and but it'll be calculated and very accurate to what I actually was doing, even though technically there's no calculation going on like during that whole time span.
So I think what you're talking about is similar to the way I don't know about Elder Scrolls, but it's certainly similar to the way the new SimCity stuff works, where every sim is supposed to have a life of its own, and they're sort of keeping track of that sort of stuff. And it's a little bit like what you're talking about, but I don't think it has to be that way. I think it's very possible to let the AI have lives outside of you and your game.
Hmm. So, but your computer would have to be running when you're not on it.
Not necessarily.
Huh.
That's it's the type of issue we were tackling with Sentia.
Would that involve a internet connection then?
Possibly.
Okay. All right. Let's move on to another question before I ask too much top secret stuff about Sentio.
I probably said way too much.
Yeah, it's really hard not to ask questions about Sentio. It just sounds so interesting. Um, all right, I saw a question up here that looks like a technical question. Wait. Okay, this is pretty interesting. Are there some other I'm just going to rephrase. What else is there out there besides behavior trees and goal-oriented behaviors? Are those the two main ones? Or are there like other techniques out there?
I'd say that, like, I went to the one of the big AI game dev conferences about a year and a half ago, in which I think almost all of the AAA developers there doing AI said that behavior trees are what they do, behavior trees are what they want, and it's kind of everything. So I'd say from what the professional big boys are doing, most of it's centered around AI, behavior trees still, and and that's probably a good place to go for building a lot of the AI that you do. There are more advanced techniques for doing things like, and people have done them for doing things like real-time planning. So, so rather than just predefining behavior inside of a behavior tree, you just give the AI enough information that it can create its own behaviors on the fly based on generating plans. That's something that's possible. It's not something we're working on for Rain Indie, but it's something if somebody wanted to do it as a project, it's certainly possible.
Okay. Yeah, that would definitely be fun to play a game where the AI plans against you.
That's what if you play Fear, the original Fear, it does.
Oh, really?
Yes,
Were
and
they? Is it just a matter of
I,
them trying to like ambush you?
again, is the guy that did that is a guy named Jeff Orkin from MIT Media Lab, and he's published papers on how that works. And I think they've even released some of the source code for that to the general public. So you can probably go find it.
Dang, that sounds really interesting to check out. All right. Well, we've already been live streaming for a little over an hour now. So, if there are any, I don't know how much more time you want me to take up out of your day. This is a really interesting uh, discussion and interview. So, I don't know if there's any other like last minute questions that you want to touch on that you've seen.
Um, I can certainly take a couple more questions if anybody has any. But outside of that, I'd also say feel free to contact us on our support. If you just want to check out Rain Indie, like I said, as we've been saying, it's totally free. You're welcome to go grab it and then ask us questions. We have sample projects that are intended to sort of teach you how to use it. But even so, doing this sort of stuff is complicated, and no matter how many tutorials and how many pieces of documentation we put out, it's still going to be complicated sometimes, and you're still going to have a learning curve. So feel free to contact our support. There's no charge for that either. We help as many people as we can. So please do that. And you can also use our support to give us feedback and tell us things you'd like to see. We're not going to guarantee that we're going to do them, but if they make sense, you'll probably see it in a future version.
And one thing I'm going to add to that, what you said about it being a little bit difficult to learn, is it seems like Rain Indie, like I can't tell exactly as of like right now, but it definitely seems like in the recent past, there have just been a ton of updates to Rain Indie, and it's just constantly evolving. So the documentation has to keep up with that. So that because it kind of seems like every once in a while, just something will become obsolete, and it's just like, nope, Rain Indie is just better now. Like you don't need to worry about that anymore. So I guess there's kind of got to keep your eye out for things like that when you're reading the documentation.
Yeah, and keep in mind too that the documentation is set up as a wiki, and for those people that feel like they know Rain Indie really well and would like to contribute to the wiki, you can contact Jester there, and Jester at rivaltheory.com, and request access to it. And if we think that you're competent enough, and I mean that in a good way, to help us out with the wiki stuff, we'd gladly let you in and let you help us keep it up to date if you want to.
That sounds awesome. And definitely, I will be doing at least one tutorial because I got to be careful because I tend to promise a lot of tutorials that I never have the time to do. And I have like a backed up list of tutorials that I've promised. But as you can see in the what's playing in the, let me point my finger in the right direction, what's playing in the background is me working with Rain Indie. So I do know some stuff, so I'm definitely going to do a tutorial or two. Maybe more on Rain Indie, so definitely check out my channel if you're looking for some Rain Indie information. So that should hopefully be up in the near future. Is there anywhere else that people can go to learn how to use Rain Indie? I know you guys got some tutorials on Rival Theory's YouTube page.
Yeah, Nick, are those up to date? Tutorials on YouTube?
Our tutorials are not.
Yeah, I think the tutorials that we have posted on YouTube are probably older Rain 1 tutorials.
Yeah.
And while it's possible you might get some information out of them, you're probably better off finding some things that the community has put together, just doing a couple searches on the web or something like that. Is there anything else?
I have a thread on our Rain forums that is community generated tutorials that everyone can take a look at, and it's constantly evolving as more tutorials come in.
Yeah, so we'll try to keep, as we find out about them, we'll keep a list of tutorials that people have been creating that we think are pretty good on our website or on our support site in our forums.
All right, great. So if you're watching this video on YouTube, I will try to put a link in the description to as many of those things as we talked about. It's been like an hour-long show, and we talked about a bunch of different things. So I'll try to link as many things as we talked about in the description below. But yeah, I think that pretty much wraps it up. So Bill or Dr. William Klein, thank you for being on the show. This has been awesome.
All right, thanks. It was great.
All right, well, I guess until my next episode, I will see you guys later, and keep making games, and go download Rain Indie because it's free and really awesome. So yes, all right, bye everyone, keep making games.